Hello, my name is Steve Bailey. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit if I can. I've prepared a PowerPoint slide um, that hopefully gives some idea of what I think my role as a professor in online teaching classes is, and also all of my other classes. One of the struggles we have in online is that we may not get to sit across a table. We may not be able to interact volubly. And a lot of people ask me, what's it like teaching online? How do you do things without the interaction that we get in a live classroom? Um, Hopefully, I can address some of this. I like online teaching. I think it certainly works for some students. Um, you don't have to be in a classroom to learn, but some people, think that video learning is better. I think we need to engage one another. So let me walk through me a little bit and some other things, and I'll try to keep this under 10 minutes. Um, I just put these together, but I basically grew up across the river in Edwardsville. Um, I moved around a lot as a young person. I was born in Provo, Utah, and then my father was pursuing a PhD under the GI Bill. He was a World War II veteran who Staff Sergeant, United States Army Air Force, 8th Army. Who was able to get an English PhD and land a job teaching English literature at SIU Edwardsville. So eventually we wound up in Edwardsville High School, or Edwardsville, and I graduated from the high school there. So the tiger is our mascot, and I couldn't really get their logo to download, so I went and found a good tiger picture. Um, when I was there, we were not necessarily a very dominant sports team, but apparently now the football team is very good. And I played tennis myself, not very good. Um, yeah, it's pretty good. I was sixth man on a seven-person squad. Um, I then went to the University of Illinois, where I began as a Naval ROTC inductee, but quickly discovered that the Navy and I were not well suited for one another long term. Uh, anyway, I majored in English literature, not real certain what I was going to do other than follow in my father's footsteps. But when he told me how hard it was to get a job as an English professor, I eventually switched over to the law. But I was free to take courses I was really interested in, which was mathematics and also psychology. I did kind of a combined minor in math and psych. And believe it or not, this is a phenomenal preparation for the law. And we're going to be talking about the law. I can't say that my work at the University of Illinois was stellar. It was good enough to get me into law school. I had a lot of social learning that I went on, but I was able to get into the one and only school of law that I applied to, which is Southern Illinois University, and this is, I believe, their logo is the clock tower. If you ever go down to Carbondale, this is a pretty prominent building. And It was a great school of law for me. Any of you thinking about going to law school should consider at least two schools that most St. Louisans don't consider, and that's SIU School of Law down in Carbondale. It's only 2 hours drive away. Great setting, fabulous little school, very inexpensive. And the other is the University of Missouri Kansas City. Um, UMKC School of Law and SIU are very similar, kind of smaller places, smaller campuses, not necessarily the tickets to the big firms and everything else. If you want to work in St. Louis, SLU is the best place. Um, just like if you want a job in Chicago, the University of Illinois is a really good law school. WashU is a much more international place. But after I got out of law school, I became a trial lawyer. And essentially, I did a lot of deposition work. I tried 13 jury cases. And if my memory is correct, I had about a 6-7 record. We played for fairly big dollars. I did 7 years as an insurance defense attorney, but was passed over for partnership with good reason, and eventually landed a new job as an FELA plaintiff's lawyer. And FELA is the Federal Employers Liability Act, which is railroad injury suits. Um, we will be dealing a little bit with that. I deal with this better in my face-to-face class where I have a mock trial, and we use the law of negligence prior to the passage of the FLA. That case happened about a decade too early for the poor plaintiff. Um, anyway, after about 11 years, I was getting a little sour on the law as a career, and I thought that I had skills as an investment representative. Um, if we go back to my initial slide, you'll see that I have a CFP designation. That's a certified financial planner. The JD is my law degree. Ordinarily, lawyers cannot utilize that degree designation because there used to be a time when you could get a Bachelor of Laws, and it was thought discriminatory, or not discriminatory, but prejudicial to people who didn't have that, because there's a difference between a bachelor's degree and a doctoral degree. And people who had a bachelor's degree, which would be essentially people with a better education than Abraham Lincoln, probably the world's or the United States' greatest lawyer, uh, that the people with a bachelor's might lose out to the people with a doctoral degree, or that might be utilized in a court of law against people with a bachelor's. Anyway, I began looking at retraining to become a certified financial planner. As I was doing that, I was able to find a couple of small of counsel jobs. That is, I was not really a member of the firm. I was somebody that kind of worked on an hourly basis. And I did an insurance defense stint, as well as something for the capital litigation division of the Illinois Appellate Defender's Office, where we looked at whether people had been given valid representation in capital murder cases. So this was Sixth Amendment and Eighth Amendment to the United States Constitution challenges. Were they given adequate counsel? Um, we'll develop this as we go on, but generally it's pretty hard to prove that the Sixth Amendment was violated, even if the lawyer is substandard. If they are an attorney and they didn't make egregious errors, generally that's all you get in terms of having a lawyer. I didn't do very well as an investment representative because it's primarily a sales job. So I was fiddling around with this. It's trying to tell people, you need an annuity and here's what you ought to invest in. So those who can't do, teach. I eventually, through the happenstance of having a neighbor who was a faculty member at UMSL, got onto the faculty at the University of Missouri St. Louis, where I was offered a position teaching life insurance and employee benefits. I started about 3 weeks before September 11th of 2001, and I remember driving into class that day, and there were no planes in the air. Those of you who go near UMSL, this won't sound very unusual, but up until that day, there were usually as many as 6 planes in the air almost all the time as we were landing. They would land 2 to 3 minutes apart. Lambert was a very busy airport. That ended all of that. I also have taught retirement planning and employee benefits. I no longer teach life insurance. I teach principles of insurance and risk management. So these are all UMSL classes. And then in 2011, the Merrimack campus of St. Louis Community College offered me an opportunity to teach legal environment of business. I think we had some kind of shuffling between UMSL people and others. I had been teaching um, legal environment of business at UMSL since about 2008. My records are unfortunately not perfectly good on this. Not a good idea at my age, 59, to not have better records. But um, anyway, I've been teaching for a fairly long time, and I have a lot of theories, but I'd like you to sort of think about, what I really think I give people the best opportunities to grow at. And first of all, is critical thinking. A fair amount of us come into college classes thinking that it's the professor's duty to teach us all the answers. Um, College is to me a much more inquisitive adventure, and particularly when we're talking about the law, we want to be looking at, is that answer correct? Uh, Maybe there's a better law. Maybe even the absence of law might be a better result for the human condition. So, what I'm always kind of wanting people to do is maybe find one answer, but see if there aren't five, six, seven, eight other answers, and then begin to look at, is this a better answer? Why? Why not? What is better about it? If you want to call it the pros and the cons, we could do this, but when we're dealing in business and we're making decisions and, doing something and not doing something is a decision. Uh, and we've got to remember that the law has 20/20 hindsight. It will unwind your decision-making process to see whether you did the right thing based on the information then available. Um, and so some students kind of come here thinking we're going to get a whole bunch of clear and fast, simple answers. I just don't see the law in that fashion. It wasn't how it worked as we were doing things. We made arguments. We had an adversarial system. And I'm going to talk in a second about Abraham Lincoln, so I'm already over my time frame, I'm afraid here. But a lot of what I do to get students thinking and to get students wrapped around the issues and to show and to give them their opportunity to show me they understand what's going on, what's at stake, what the good answers are, what the not so good answers are. I use a lot of things like discussion boards where students actually have to actively type and communicate with one another about ideas and issues. I use, I think, 3 or 4 different um, uh, projects over the course of a semester, and it may be more than that. My classes, you do quite a bit of writing. Not a lot of long papers, but a lot of 2 and 3 paragraph short statements, but short, clear statements. I also believe in students doing presentations. I think it's very important that we try to get you to be better presenters. I'm giving you kind of a PowerPoint here in uh, but you're going to you go out in the real world, you're going to not necessarily be doing PowerPoint, but you're going to be in front of people as an expert. This is what college is about, is to make you able to learn on your own and able to become an expert in anything that you're assigned to do. Are you going to be the world's greatest? Maybe not. But you're maybe going to be able to find the information from the world's greatest thinkers or the nation's greatest thinkers or the local greatest thinkers, the local greatest expression artists, and put that back so other people can grasp it and understand it. I'm a deep believer in peer-to-peer learning. I think that some of the best teachers in any classroom are your fellow students. And so, let me end this part of this with saying that as you're going through this class, it's not my intent to create confusion, at least not complete confusion. There is some teaching philosophy where I want to get you maybe to the edge of understanding, but force you to look deeper. So sometimes I may create a little confusion because that drives you to want to get the right solution. At the same time, my communication skills are not perfect, and not everybody understands exactly what I'm driving at. So that if you've got a question about what you think you should be doing, go ahead and send me an email. I will say that to communicate with me, the best way, this is a little old school maybe, is to send me an email, but also send me a text saying you sent me an email. I teach a lot of classes. I've got a lot of other responsibilities, so I'm not in front of a computer all the time. But I want you to know there are no stupid questions. However, you know, not having read the assignment and thought about it carefully and come up to me and said, I think what you're asking for is X. Am I correct? Is a much better way of going, what do you want us to do here? What I want you to do is engage the material at a high level, at the highest level you can, and see what you can put out there and see with presentation with and against other people. We'll work inside groups, and sometimes groups are challenging because there's a couple of people who don't want to work, and there's a couple of people who just want to do it all. We're trying to find the sort of Goldilocks solution, what is just right. But let me talk at the end, if I may. Let me see if I can get out of here. I wanted to look at one of America's greatest lawyers. Let me see if I can get to this guy. Do I have? Oh, I think I got rid of it. Not good. Not good. All right, I must have gone over the top of this. All right, I want Abraham Lincoln's. Yeah, I want the Abraham Lincoln second inaugural address. And you'll notice I tend to use Google. I think Google does a great job. It's probably the best place to start almost any research environment. And I'm going to make no bones about it. Abraham Lincoln is one of my heroes. This is one of the kindest, most gentle men ever to tread the face of the earth. He is the American Solon, Solon. If you ever read Plutarch's Parallel Lives, the one thing that at least I came away with was that the greatest statesman that ever lived was a Greek guy named Solon. And I can't remember which city-state he came out of. He was not Athenian, if I remember. Anyway, Lincoln, in this second inaugural address, makes mention of the scourge of slavery. That horrible, horrible scourge that brought the Civil War to bear, and for which we fought a war that neither side anticipated would be so bloody and so long drawn out and so hotly contested. And in Lincoln's words here, look at the length of this. This is his second inaugural address. And nowadays we get an hour and a half. This is 15 minutes tops. I mean, I'm probably talking longer than Lincoln did. But the one concept that I think we need to look at, and so if you get a chance, look at this, read over it, because he closes with these most powerful words, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Lincoln and Grant formed the Reconstruction, which their vision was, let's welcome our brothers back in. And I think one of the things that we sometimes forget in the law is that we should all be like the lawyers, strive mightily, and eat and drink together. That's a Shakespeare quote. As an attorney, I always tried my best for my client, but I always shook my opponent's hand and congratulated them on a job well done. The law is about human order and human frailty. And, we need to remember that we should have malice toward none and charity for all. That, there are people who can use the law like a sword. But for the most part, it is, at least to me, something we could use as a shield. But we do not want it as a shield to carry back our dead. We want to move forward with it. So I don't know if this helps you get used to me. I mean, I'm a fairly demanding professor. I like for you to work at the highest level you can. I like for you to work in a timely fashion, in an organized fashion, and in a diligent fashion. I can't say that I have mastery of all of those things myself. I'm a human being, and I could look back on my life with deep regret, but I've been lucky. God has blessed me with wonderful opportunities to do a variety of very interesting things and to close out my life helping other people begin to grow in their own lives. And so, I can see this course, bottom line, as a first course in junior level or higher analysis of problems. Business problems are going to be a mixture of legal and ethical problems. And so I've set up the course to give us a lot of opportunities to sort of play in the mud with this stuff. Let's create our own pottery. And, there aren't necessarily any single right answers, but there are wrong justifications. Did you think it all the way through? If you don't, some lawyer will be glad to think it through for you after the fact in front of a jury. And so, a lot of what we're going to try to do is get you prepared, uh, excuse me, for how the law may treat businesses and the individuals who work in them. Thanks for listening. Enjoy.